Hi guys! Today we're going to read story number 7 in our Westward Expansion reading unit. And I'm pretty excited about what the story is about. It's very interesting to me, and it helped grow something that we all know and still use today. So the first thing that I want you to think about is, how are some ways that you communicate with family who lives far away? Or who just lives in different parts of town than you do. When I think about this question, I think about how I can call them on my phone, or I can video chat with them and I can see them and have conversations that way. Another way I think about is email, but I don't email my family very often. And then finally, I think about writing them letters. And I really like to write my family letters and postcards and send them and let them know that I'm thinking about them, because mail is such a fun thing to get. I love checking my mailbox and having fun letters in there to read. So today's story tells about how the settlers that moved west were able to communicate with their families. Because remember, in the times when they were, when this was happening, when they were settling out west, when they were settling the Oregon Territory, there weren't things like telephones or computers that people could use to help stay in touch with their families. So they had to rely on mail. But as you know, when they were first moving out there weren't post offices. So today's story is going to tell us about the solution that they found to the problem of communicating with people in the West. So today's story is called The Pony Express. And this story is set in the mid-1800s. Many people were heading west to start a new life in that Western Territory. So we're going to take a look at our vocabulary words, and then we'll jump into our story. The first word is the word endurance. Endurance is the ability to go on for a long time despite pain or discomfort. Whoops. Straighten us out here. So when I think about endurance, I think about like working my body hard. So maybe if I go for a long hike, or if I go ride my bike, I would need endurance to keep going, even if it might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable. The next word is landmarks. Landmarks are objects or structures on land that are easy to see and recognize. A landmark that I can think of that I actually can see exactly from where I'm sitting is the big P on the mountain that helps us know that you're in Prescott. The next word is route. A route is a way to get from one place to another place. Our last word is hiding from you. Our last word today is the word venture. A venture is a business activity where a successful result is uncertain. So here's our first picture for our story, The Pony Express. And I'm just going to double check because I had it way off before. All right, so here we go, The Pony Express. In the 1850s, mail delivery was not as fast as it is today. Airplanes had not yet been invented, and neither had cars. Railroads had been invented, but the railroad tracks did not run all the way across the country. Suppose you wanted to send a letter from New York to California over 150 years ago. The railroads could carry your letter from New York to Missouri. That might take a day or two, but the train tracks ended in Missouri. There, your letter would have to be loaded onto a stagecoach like the one shown here. The stagecoach would be pulled by a team of horses. It would bump along dirt roads at 5 or 6 miles an hour. It would take almost a month for the stagecoach to carry your letter to California. The stagecoach right here is this red part, and we've got our horses pulling it along. In 1860, 3 businessmen came up with an idea. They thought people would be willing to pay extra to send a letter if there were a quicker way to deliver it. All they needed to do was to find a way to speed up delivery time. The idea they came up with was simple. They would have riders carry the mail on horseback and run a sort of relay race from Missouri to California. They figured that a single rider on a fast horse could travel very fast. He could go much faster than a stagecoach loaded with passengers and luggage. They knew that horses and riders would get tired, so the businessmen decided there would have to be rest stations along the way. The Pony Express was not an easy venture to start. The businessmen who started it had to spend a lot of money to get things set up before they could make any money. They hoped the United States government would support them and pay them to be official carriers of United States mail, but there were no guarantees. After they decided which roads and trails to use, they had to set up stations along the route. One rider left from California in the west. At the same time, another rider left from Missouri. So riders traveled from both ends of the route to carry the mail as fast as possible. Finally, they had to hire riders and buy fast horses for them to ride. The horses were chosen for their endurance, or for their speed and their ability to continue on for a very long time. Riders were usually young men, 18 years old or younger. They had to be tough and loyal. Riders would ride a leg or a small section of the route, changing horses at each station. This map shows the whole route of the Pony Express. It started in St. Joseph, Missouri, where the train tracks ended. You can see where it starts with that little star right there. And remember, Missouri is the state that most settlers started in to begin their journey on the Oregon Trail. The Pony Express went all the way to Sacramento, California. The thick red line on the map shows the route the riders followed. The pictures above and below the route show some landmarks the riders rode past. So you can see they rode past some different tribal lands, Chimney Rock in Nebraska, land where there were a lot of bison. They rode past rattlesnakes. They saw cowboys. Remember the mountains that they had to cross? And looks like here's a fort. I'm not sure what fort that is. Pony Express riders had to be ready to jump into the saddle and ride 50 miles on a moment's notice. They rode in the scorching heat of the day. They rode at night by the light of the moon. They rode through rain, hail, and sleet. They galloped across dusty deserts and zigzagged up dangerous mountain paths. They rode across wide open prairie and through large herds of buffalo. There are stories of riders becoming lost in fierce blizzards and having to lead their horses on foot. Native Americans watched these riders and saw it as more evidence of an endless flow of people moving into their land. Not only did a rider have to worry about himself, he had to worry about his horse too. Because the terrain was so varied, a horse could stumble and fall, or it could be spooked by wolves or stampeding herds of buffalo. Here's a photo of a Pony Express station that is still standing today. There were more than 150 stations like this one along the route. The stations were located about 10 miles apart. That was about as far as a horse could gallop before getting tired. They made swing stations where a rider could exchange his tired horse for a fresh one and then continue on the trail. They also had home stations where riders could stay and rest, while another rider carried the mail to the next station. The riders waited at their home station until it was time to return with the mail that another rider had delivered. If all went well, this is what would happen. A Pony Express rider would come galloping up. He would jump off his horse. Another rider would be standing in front of the station, holding a new horse. The new rider would unhitch the mail pouches from the old horse and hitch them to his horse. Then he would jump on his horse and gallop away. The rider who had just completed his part of the journey would be fed a simple meal of bacon and beans. If he was lucky, there would be some cornbread too. Then he would get some much-needed rest. Both riders and station masters tried to save as much time as possible and to be as fast as possible in order to get mail to settlers quickly. The horse could move faster if it carried less weight. Here is a picture of another Pony Express station. This one is called Simpson Springs. It is located in Utah. You can see that this station is surrounded by a desert, and there are mountains rising up in the distance. Can you imagine how hot it could be riding across the desert during the day, and how cold it could be at night? And of course, the rider would be moving in a cloud of dust. The men who created the Pony Express were businessmen, and their goal was to make money. They wanted to make sure everybody knew about the service they were providing, so they made posters and ads like this one. It cost $5 to mail a letter via the Pony Express, which is the same as $130 today. Imagine spending that much money to mail a letter. But notice it says 10 days instead of 1 month. That's a big difference. In 1860, the American writer Mark Twain took a trip across the United States. He was traveling by stagecoach, but he and his fellow travelers kept an eye out for the Pony Express. In his book, Roughing It, Twain described his first sight of the Pony Express. We had had a consuming desire to see a pony rider, but somehow or other, all that passed us managed to streak by in the night. We heard only a whiz and a hail. The swift phantom of the desert was gone before we could get our heads out of the windows. But presently the driver exclaims, "Here he comes!" Every neck is stretched further, every eye strained wider. Away across the endless dead level of the prairie, a black speck appears against the sky. In a second or two, it becomes a horse and a rider, rising and falling, sweeping toward us nearer and nearer, growing more and more distinct, more and more sharply defined, nearer and still nearer. A flutter of hooves comes faintly to the ear. In another instant, there is a whoop and a hurrah from our upper deck, a wave of the rider's hand, but no reply. Then man and horse burst past our excited faces and go winging away like a belated fragment of a storm. So that was what one author wrote to describe what he saw from his stagecoach. Mark Twain was not the only person who was excited about the Pony Express. Lots of people used the Pony Express to send letters. Unfortunately, the Pony Express did not last very long. This picture can help you understand why. The men on the ground and behind the Pony Express rider are setting up telegraph poles. Once the telegraph lines stretched across the country, it changed things. A telegraph is a machine that can send messages over a series of wires in just minutes. People in New York could send telegraph messages to California. A telegraph message could travel from New York to California in a matter of minutes. There was no way the Pony Express could compete with that. The Pony Express went out of business in 1861, after only 18 months of service. So the telegraph was a much faster and safer way to get the messages across the country. Although the Pony Express did not last long, people still remember the can-do spirit of the founders and the bravery of the riders who carried the mail. This statue of a Pony Express rider carrying mail helps us remember this significant event in American history. So, what do you think? Would you have sent a letter on the Pony Express? Or maybe would you have been a rider on the Pony Express? I think it's a pretty fascinating way to send mail, and I think it was a really creative idea that the creators of the Pony Express had to get the letters across the country much quicker. So now go ahead and take out your questions and see if you can answer those based on the story from today.